To hear about details of how to overcome these hurdles. Our first speaker today will be Robin Clemens of Kumo. Robin brings a wealth of experience from leading finance tech innovations at BMW and Deutsche Bank, and he used to serve as a co-chair at Hyperledger under the Linux Foundation. Since 2020, Robin has channeled his experience and expertise and passion into pioneering solutions at the nexus of carbon markets, technology, and finance. This manifests in his PhD research about zero-knowledge proof for advanced climate reporting, speaking at the UNFCCC, COP conferences, and leading a climate action group of 500 people. So a whole lot of experience, and we're happy to hear his presentation about financing biochar, insights, strategies, and industry perspectives. Robin Kumo.
Hey everyone, thank you very much, Leo, for the introduction. I'm Robin, CEO at Kumo, and we focus on financing solutions for biochar projects and CDR projects in general. Our thesis is that currently what's holding back the carbon market is access to finance. It's not the quality of projects, it's not the ability to operate, it's finance. If we don't manage to drive institutional debt finance to this market, we won't get it into a gigaton scale fast enough. Currently, there are few, or this is an overview of the financing that's available to biochar projects or carbon projects in general, where the majority of financings that we see is either equity investments by equity investors or venture capitalists. And specifically to carbon markets, we see carbon streaming as an option and pre-selling or pre-purchasing carbon credits. Carbon streaming means that an investor buys your stream of carbon credits of 50% of all carbon credits generated over the next 10 years, as an example. And pre-purchasing is you buy up front at a discount a fixed amount of carbon credits that will be delivered over the next time. The issue with these is they are very expensive from a project developing point because there's lots of risk and there's also risk and return. Then we also see grants or subsidies available for biochar projects, but accessing these takes a long time, and they're not enough for us to scale this market. So what we focus on at Kumo is how can we bring institutional debt finance to this market? How can we unlock low-cost, scalable finance for biochar projects? And how can we drive interest rates to below 10%? Because there are funds out there, private credit funds, that offer debt finance if you're willing to pay 15 or 80% interest rate, which is very challenging as a project to make this commercially viable. And this outlines the problem that we are focusing on, which is, yes, we have VC and equity investments for projects up to 10 million, maybe larger, maybe smaller. But this is for getting started. This is for building your pilot facility, showing a full cycle of carbon credit issuance, biochar production, selling these credits and retiring them. What we want to unlock for the carbon market is institutional debt finance, also known as project finance in renewable energy markets. But from talking to all the banks and infrastructure funds, they just have a sizing issue. They cannot invest in a 10 million project where the alternative is a $1 billion solar energy project. And there's always a relative amount of their revenue. So they have KPIs, and if you can finance a $1 billion project versus a $10 million project, they will always go to the large ones. There's lots of capital that wants to be deployed, and there are many project developers that are looking for financing, and currently this is not matched. What we spent on working on the last 2 years is developing a securitization solution. Securitization solution that means we can legally securitize future carbon credits and carbon offtake agreements, contracted cash flows, which de-risk investments for institutional investors. Debt investors, they are risk averse. It's the last stage or the latest stage of financing. We have to de-risk as much as possible, and this is a huge de-risking factor. But what this also allows us to do is we can package together projects into financing structures where it's not a single project that is facing an investor, it's a portfolio of projects. So we can get to the $100 million threshold, $70 million threshold, or $200 million threshold. What this means for a project developer is it's all bankruptcy remote. Everything is segregated. So you're not reliable for all the other projects in this portfolio. It's just you. But you are able to receive the low-cost scalable financing. We draw parallels many times, and also do the banks, from the renewable energy market in the mid-1990s. It started with equity finance. Like most markets start with risk capital flowing into venture capital, equity investments, grants. That's how markets start. But then the flipping point for renewable energy was when we managed to develop a structured product, which is project finance. And project finance is debt. Yes, it has an equity portion, but usually it's 20% or less. And the majority of financing is debt financing. And you can also draw many parallels to renewable energy markets. Renewable energy markets, when you just look at a solar, you have CapEx, and then the OpEx is, very low because you don't have to do many things. But you have two revenue streams. You have electricity, and you have the certificates. In Europe, these are certificates of origins. In carbon markets, we have biochar as a product, and then we also have credits, carbon credits, and sometimes we also have heat or electricity or even byproducts. So it's very similar. And financial world is always looking at how can we use our standardized structures and apply them to new markets. Then what's also the case for biochar is there's multiple revenue streams. If you compare biochar to direct air capture most of the time, it's just carbon credit revenue. So it's just a risk factor. In biochar, we can diversify. So that's what debt investors like a lot. The tech risk is also low. The technology we're using, that's not new. It's out for decades. We know how to operate. It works at scale. And one key element is also that we scale in number rather than in size. So when you're a biochar project developer and you're operating one facility and you want to increase your production capacity by 10 times, you scale in number. So you just buy more machines. Where in other carbon projects, you scale in size. So you need to build a completely new facility, all new tech, with the promise of making 10 times the throughput, which is from a tech risk perspective, a key advantage for biochar again. And generally, I guess we'll hear it many times over the next days, biochar is a high quality product and a high quality carbon credit. So it's also perceived as a high quality investment from institutional finance. And it comes with co-benefits. It's not just the climate action, it's not just carbon removed, it's also increased crop yields and many other things. And this is what we have learned in the last years engaging with all these debt investors, what they're looking at, just to give you some orientation. So they started looking at what can be collateralized. Banks, since the financial crisis in 2008, they have very strict capital requirements, meaning if they provide financing or invest into something, it has a risk-weighted value, and they need to put reserves on the side. So the more collateral they can get, the less money they need to put aside. So they look at cash flows, and especially the ones that are contracted via offtake agreements. This can be on carbon credits, this can be on the biochar, can also be PPAs. And then they compare contracted financing volume versus the volume that you need to access. So is it 10 million in contracted financing volume versus a 7 million loan, which might work? Or do you have offtake agreements worth of 10 million and look for 20 million in financing, which might not work? Because currently the floor price of carbon credits is 0. No one is willing to take any market or price risks in debt finance. Everything has to be contracted. And also the contracts, they have to be bankable. Bankable means they have to be fixed take or pay. They have to be legally binding. Preferably they have to be direct. And then you look at the merchant. Is it a blue chip company? Then you have very low merchant risk. Banks also look at termination clauses and shortfall provisionings. And then, yes, quality is important, but what we are observing is quality is not the key focus for investors or debt investors. It's different from an investing perspective than from a buying perspective of carbon credits. Because basically the key thing you as a debt investor care about is will the project or the company be able to repay principal plus interest. So they look at the company structure. How is the company funded? Is it a pre-seed startup? Is it Series A startup? Is there maybe a parent company behind? And very important, who are the sponsors? No one wants to be the first, and no one wants to be alone. So if something goes wrong, is there another institutional investor on board on the cap table of this Biochar project developing company that could step in and to provide an additional financing amount if needed? And also they look at your experience, which ideally is, yes, you have operated a full cycle of a biochar project with the production of biochar, you have run through certification with one of the standards and issued carbon credits and also sold them. But if you haven't done a biochar project before, they look at general project development experience. Have you done any carbon markets projects in the past, or have you even done renewable energy projects? And the next step that's more biochar specific, it's feedstock. So of course, is it purpose grown for the biochar production? That's a no-go. And where is it coming from? So is it sourced sustainably? And is it available at scale? And can this also be contracted? Again, debt investors always look at stuff that is plannable, that is low risk. So is there a long-term contract on the amount of biochar that you need, not of biochar, biomass, that you need in order to scale your facility? And can you match this with offtake agreements on the end products? That's how they look at it. And the last element is financials. I mentioned that the floor price of carbon credits is 0. The market can go wrong and bust tomorrow, even though we try as hard as we can. So the thing that debt investors care about is they tick the pricing risk and market risk with offtake agreements. So they look at your operating profile, your operating costs. How much are you spending per carbon credit produced in operating expenses? What's your MAV cost per carbon credit? What's your feedstock procurement costs? What is the labor that you spend? How much are you investing into R&D? All these elements, that's how they assess the financeability of your project. And what they want to see is how can you decrease the operating costs over time? How can you increase your margins? Because they care about how well you can operate this business and if you will be able to repay this loan. And then when the financing is being structured, I mean, debt investors also look at non-biochar, non-carbon market specifics, which is just debt metrics like DSCR and LLCR, debt service cover ratio and loan life cover ratio, which are basically saying how much is your cash flow compared to the debt services that you have to repay. From all that what we've learned, we have built a financeability assessment framework. That's what we use when we work with biochar projects or carbon market projects to assess them before we structure financing with them and the banks that we work with. We are about to launch this publicly and also free for everyone, so you can run the assessment yourself and you get feedback on your project. It tells you on how to improve and what is already going well, which is also helpful in early stage, just to know, well, these are the things that I need to achieve in order to qualify for debt investment. Debt investment is not the kind of financing you can start with, but that's the money that's available when you really want to scale to commercial operation. I'm here with the German Biochar Forum. We are in G44. Please come by, ask questions, don't be a stranger. I'm an open book. I'm happy to support. We're an ecosystem. And we can only benefit if we grow all together. Thank you a lot. And if you have questions already, please feel free to ask them.
Thank you very much, Robin. I falsely introduced you as Robin Kumo. Robin Clemens is his actual name. My bad. Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes left in your slot, so we would be open to 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Please, yes, one is right here.
How would the Chinese, for example, what's their investment models for new technology?
What's the question? What's the investment model in new technologies from China, or what was the question? I'm sorry.
Today will be about approaches and experiences in financing mechanisms and biochar project development. Thank you very much for joining us, Jan. The stage is yours.
Thanks a lot. Do we have the clicker? Do you have the clicker, Paul? It's coming. Okay. So give me 1 second before I get started with the slides, but brief introduction. Great to have you all here. Thanks for giving me 15 minutes of your time. As I already said, my name is Jan Cihlar. I work for Pyreg, and I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about what does it take to actually develop an industrial-sized project in biochar today, and what are the perspectives when you talk to big banks about that? How can you unlock really a lot of institutional capital going into biochar projects? Can I? Okay, 1 second. You are giving away my numbers now.
Yeah, sorry for the
Yeah, that's perfect.
technical problems. I think by the end of this session, we'll have it sorted out, hopefully.
That's perfect. Can you see the slide on about Pyreg right now? Thumbs up, please, if you can see it. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So a little bit about Pyreg, and then I get to the interesting content. So Pyreg, as a company, has been on the market for more than 15 years now. Our first plant that we built was in 2011, and it's still actually operating. We make carbonization machines or pyrolysis machines that turn waste into value, specifically very high-grade biochar, renewable energy. And while we do that, we are, of course, sequestering permanently carbon from the atmosphere. To date, we have built and operated more than 60 machines, thank you, worldwide. And we are in, I think, 13 or more countries, actually. So one of the oldest companies in terms of equipment manufacturers on the market. And, well, we have many, many growth plans. So how do I... Sorry, how do I switch to the next? Okay, perfect. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There's a bunch of plans as well that you can see. You can come later and have a look at our booth, actually, on some of the projects we are presenting there. But what I want to first ask you about, I mentioned that when you make high-quality biochar, you can, of course, sequester carbon permanently, and you can create carbon credits. Paul was just talking about that. So can any of you guess what was the share of biochar on that voluntary carbon market as of 2023 or 2024? So out of the total credits delivered to buyers, all these big companies, what share was coming from biochar? Shout some numbers at me. 50%? 1%? Any other guesses? 90%. All right, thank you. Yeah, that gentleman got it right. So what's actually really interesting, if you look at the total purchases, right? So a lot of these credits are purchased up front before being delivered. If you look at the share of biochar on the total credit purchases, it was 9% at the end of 2023. But in terms of deliveries, so the credits that actually were issued and delivered to carbon credit buyers, it's over 90%. So thank you for that. So if you look at just the carbon removal market, the credit market, biochar is absolutely dominant there. Yeah? There is no better solution today that can deliver on that market better than biochar. Okay, if we compare the biochar commodity market, so the physical product of biochar, to some of the other ones, does anyone know what's the global size of the biochar market today? Give me some numbers. Global size of the biochar market today. Okay, we have a lot of biochar experts and no numbers. Paul, do you know that? Physical biochar? Physical biochar. 50 million? 150 million. Let's get a guess. What do you think is the size of the fertilizer market today? Yeah. All right, so let's look at the chart, right? So fertilizer market size as of last year, $290 billion. Coal market, somewhat comparable, $650 billion. Biochar, $760 million, right? So there's a long way to go. We are the most dominant on the carbon removal. Compared to some of these other commodity markets, we are at the very start. So there's a long way to go. So what I want to talk about is really why has the biochar market not yet been developed further? One piece of that is, of course, that it's a young market, it's a nascent market, it's in development, that's part of it. But there is a couple of other problems. So the first one that I hear a lot is that there is a big knowledge gap regarding biochar technology. There's lots of different high-tech, low-tech, medium-tech biochar technology providers. And the type of biochar they make, the type of emissions they make, overall, the type of the projects they set up, it's vastly different. And to navigate the space as someone that's just entering that space is very, very difficult. The biochar markets, and my colleagues have been talking about that before as well, are quite fragmented today. What does that mean? So if you try to sell your biochar today as a physical product, it's an extremely bespoke market. You cannot go to a commodity trading market and get a price index and know I'm going to get $400 per ton of my biochar. It's impossible in most regions. It's a bespoke market when you have to find your buyer and then you have to negotiate your price. And that's, of course, not good for investment. The same thing is project developers are facing way too many tasks. So imagine the wind industry. You're building a wind farm. You are navigating one market. That's the electricity market. Already complicated enough. In biochar project development, you navigate biomass markets for your feedstock, the biochar market for the commodity, carbon credit markets, and energy markets in some cases. Vastly more difficult, and that's why you see a lot of project developers really struggling to go through all of that. And lastly, and that I think is kind of a consequence of the first three, is that the real financial resources are lacking. There is no kind of standardized way to access debt or equity finance in biochar today, and only some of the very first projects are actually able to tackle that. So that's been a bit of a downer. Now, what can we actually do about that? So how we look at projects that we build together with our clients is that they ideally have 4 revenue levers that they can build on. So they are not standing on one leg, but they actually have 4 legs. I cannot really show that, but I guess you get the picture. So first, a lot of biochar projects today pay for their feedstock, wood waste, right? Wood chips, something like that. They have to pay a lot of money to even start their projects. What investors like to see is that you get paid for processing feedstock. So the typical examples is sewage sludge, animal manure, anywhere where someone can pay you to get rid of the waste they have problem with. It's a really good starting point for biochar, yeah? And a bit beyond what traditionally biochar processing has been thinking of. Now, secondly, obviously, biochar is a physical product. Many different applications. You have to find the right one for your region, where you can get the best price, or combine cases even if you can. Carbon removal credits. As Paul was just showing, the price has been remarkably stable, so it gives you some idea of what your revenue there can be. And then in our case, we actually make a lot of excess renewable energy as well. So you can sell the heat, electricity, or steam from the machines as well, right? So ideally, the point is that all these 4 levers have to work together to make a sustainable business case for biochar. I don't know how far you can read it, but I find this really interesting. So when I talk to large banks, when I talk to asset leasing companies, yeah, some of the biggest ones, and they're thinking about how would we create a program that we would be comfortable financing for industrial-sized biochar, this is the kind of top 10, top 15 list that they will always require from anyone that they are talking to. And some of the things are simple, but some of the things are maybe a bit counterintuitive. So let's go through it very quickly. So one is on the project organization side. They would ideally like to see a company always that has other revenue streams than it's just a company that's just starting, right? That's simple. If you set up an SPV, special purpose vehicle, to just set up your new 10 million biochar project, they're not going to give you debt for that. So ideally, you're linking it to an existing operation, bioenergy, forestry industry, whatever you have. That's much easier. The second is that you want to have an experienced project operator and ideally a service level agreement with the OEM. Again, they don't want to see people that have never run a pyrolysis plant before, right? That's just a no. They want to see experienced people that make sure that the plants can run and be maintained properly. Ideally, you also do a technical and economic feasibility study to really make sure that you thought about all the technical stuff, but you also really build your business case on solid basis and you can demonstrate it to the investors. And then the basic things like you need to have your site control secured. We see that all the time. People come to us with really great ideas, and then we ask them, have you actually secured a rental or a buy purchase agreement for your land? And they say, well, not yet. But then you don't have a project. The same goes with permits, really underestimated in project development, how long in certain geographies permitting can take. And ideally on the technology side, you of course work with companies that are really reputable, they have a track record, and they can demonstrate case studies, right? They can demonstrate operational plans to the investors. Just to make it really clear to them. Offtake, really important thing. Everybody has been saying that, but I have to stress it one more time. For the 4 main levers, so I guess your feedstock, the biochar, carbon credits, energy, every big investment institution would love to see a 5-year offtake to start with. It's almost, you're not going to get anywhere unless you have some kind of offtake agreement on all 4 of those. Super important. Not easy to get, but it's possible. And then obviously all the certifications that you need to go through. You need to be able to certify your biochar. You need to be able to certify the carbon credits you're going to be making, and then a bunch of other things. One important metric that I always like to use when you talk to bankers, everybody's talking about IRR, NPVs, and things like that. One of the only things they are looking at is what's called the debt service coverage ratio. That essentially means your EBITDA over the debt payments that you have in that year, right? And if it's below 125, that's typically the rule of thumb, nobody's talking to you. For them, that's too high risk. So one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years on that is really, that's the key metrics that bankers look at. That's the one that you always want to make sure when you ask them that you have gotten right when you're asking them for financing. Now, what are some of the options for large-scale project finance? That's not surprising at all. Equity, debt, potentially asset leasing. Yeah, I assume that you mostly know how this works, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But this is kind of the top 10, top 12 requirements that you will always see from bankers if you want to build an industrial-sized biochar project that's scalable and repeatable. How would you ideally do that? This is how we look at it in a more of a project development journey, where you have the initial consultation and information gathering, obviously, about what you're actually trying to do. But then, as fast as you can, you hire someone to help you with a project feasibility study. And that should look both at the technical side and at the business case, environmental permits, all of that, right? So that's a really critical step at the very beginning, that you should very quickly evaluate whether your project actually makes sense at all, whether it's ever going to make any money. Now, then you go to the contracting stage, which is, again, energy, biochar, carbon credits, and then eventually to project financing, building your project. And then you shouldn't stop there, because you will need to maintain and operate your project. So that's one thing. And you will also, on an ongoing basis, need to be able to issue credits and sell them. Yeah, so there's a bunch of things that also need to happen after your project launch. At Pyreg, that's exactly what we also thought of. That actually, as of last week, we have launched a bunch of consulting services to address all these key points in the customer journey. So we're now offering both project feasibility studies, complete outsourcing of the credit management for the project developers that work with us. So we take care of all the burden of getting certified, issue credits, and selling them to people. And also, we are now working with a couple of large financial institutions to structure a program for project financing for our clients. Yeah, and I'm saying this, it sounds like a little bit of a sales pitch, but for me, this is what we need to do as an industry as well. The OEMs and the project developers need to work together. Otherwise, we are not able to scale up, I think, to the level at the very beginning that I showed. The fertilizer market, the coal market versus the biochar market. For me, that's the aspiration. I think that's as far as we can go eventually. So just to close off, what do we do at Pyreg? As many of the other biochar companies, we create value out of waste. We can process almost any biogenic waste into biochar and all the other things that I mentioned before. We are at booth H41, so happy to meet you there and talk a little bit more if you're interested about our company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan from Pyreg. Questions from the audience, please. Any questions for Jan? This one over here. I'll just give you mine.
Yeah, are you aware of the technology by Applied Carbon in America for having pyrolysis plants behind tractors which directly produce agricultural waste and convert it into biochar? It seems to me that would be a very good solution for the future. It cuts out transport costs, and it could be a big solution for first world countries. I don't know to what extent the diversity of different biochar projects affects standardization of equipment, which would mean scaling would allow prices to drop of equipment.
I'm not aware of the company that you mentioned, but we are a technology provider, right? So we work with our own technology for our projects. I think in general, what I tried to say today would be applicable to any industrial size, high-tech manufacturer of biochar pyrolysis equipment, but I'm not aware of the specific company that you mentioned. No.
Further questions? No one? All right. Well, then we get an early finish, and we'll continue the discussion during our debate later on. Thank you very much, Jan. All right. Our next speaker, I have to make an excuse in advance. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce her last name, so please bear with me and excuse me for potentially butchering it very badly. Our next speaker will be Maria Puig-Arnavat. I hope that was somewhat correct. Maria is a specialist with more than 15 years of experience with biomass and thermochemical conversion processes. She holds a PhD on biomass gasification and has scientific and practical experience with gasification, pyrolysis, and biochar from 12 years of research in the field. She joined Ramboll 4 years ago and has extensive experience in technical due diligence for biogas plants, gasification, and pyrolysis of plastics, waste, and biomass. She's been working as a project manager, technical lead, and senior specialist for several TDDs. Thank you very much for joining us on stage. Maria, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. And the previous speakers have talked a lot about investment. And then it's when companies like Ramboll that do due diligence services, play an important role. And I wanted to tell you a bit of our experience on due diligence process for pyrolysis plants. Not only producing biochar, but also for other kind of product. Just a couple of slides about Ramboll. We are an independent architecture, engineering, and consultancy company founded in 1945 in Denmark, where we have the headquarters, and it's owned by the Ramboll Foundation. We work across 7 markets: architecture and landscape, environmental and health, management consulting, water, transport, buildings, and energy. That is where I'm working. And our focus is provide sustainable solutions across all these markets. Inside the energy market, I work in the waste-to-energy department, where we do incineration plants, biogas plants, gasification, and pyrolysis. So we are globally more than 18,000 employees in 35 countries, and for energy, we are 2,500 employees in 23 countries. So we can usually cover most of the projects in different geographies. In this slide, I've tried to select some recent projects that we have worked on pyrolysis. As you can see, not all of them are targeting biomass as a feedstock and biochar production, but we have worked a lot in the Nordics, probably because Ramboll is a Danish company to start with. But a lot of interest, from investors comes on due diligences for plastic pyrolysis and end-of-life tire pyrolysis. But right now, we are also working in Finland on a feasibility and concept study for a pyrolysis plant that would produce biochar from wood pellets. Right, but we get a lot of pyrolysis projects, and mainly it's due diligences and feasibility studies. And what I will show now in my presentation is, the lessons learned from these projects. So first, and to make sure that we are all in the same page, what's a due diligence project? So I included here the definition. Right, it's a systematic process of assessing all aspects of a business or a project before proceeding with the investment or the implementation. So we evaluate the technical, financial, legal, regulatory, and environmental factors, right, with the idea to identify these risks and ensuring compliance and optimizing the decision. Why is it important to run a due diligence for a pyrolysis plant? Is because for investment protection, it ensures that the capital is spent wisely, reducing the risk of failure. Our goal is to identify potential technical, financial, and regulatory risks. Also, guarantee alignment with environmental, safety, and legal standards. Look at the project viability from different points of view, and make sure that it is aligned with the sustainability goals. So, of course, the benefits are that it provides a clear understanding of the risk and opportunities that the project presents for the investors and increases the confidence of the investors in this project. It also identifies flaws that if it's at the design or operational stage, they can be improved, so the process can be optimized and at the same time reduce costs, and aligns with the process with the project with the long-term energy and environmental goals. So a due diligence process, a complete due diligence process has different working streams because it's a comprehensive assessment of all the aspects as mentioned before. So we have the technical due diligence that assesses the technical feasibility of a project, the environmental due diligence that looks into the environmental impact of the pyrolysis plants and ensures compliance with the environmental regulations, and the commercial due diligence that looks into the market position and commercial prospects of the plant. So these three types of working streams are the ones that we work with at Ramboll together and combined or separately. But then we also have financial due diligence with the objective of looking at the financial health and economic viability of the pyrolysis plants, look into the projected financial statements, the cost structure and all the costs associated with the projects, the revenue streams, and also looking into the financing agreements, debt levels, and any outstanding liabilities. And the legal due diligence, right, that wants to ensure that the pyrolysis operates within the legal framework and has all the necessary permits and licenses. So it reviews ownership and title documents, all the contracts, looks into the intellectual property rights, and looks into any ongoing potential litigations that could impact the plant's operation. And how long does one of these processes takes? I mean, it depends on the complexity of the project and how mature it is, but usually our clients ask us to get it done in 6-8 weeks. 8 weeks would be ideal for us. It's closer to 6 weeks what we get many times. So now I want to dive in a bit into the technical, environmental, and commercial due diligences. That is what we have experience on. So in the technical due diligence, we conduct this target review. And now I have summarized some of the lessons learned, from these projects that I mentioned. So I have, in this table I have 2 columns. One is what we encounter in most of the projects, that we would call them like poor practices, and then what top performance best practices would be, right? If we talk about feedstocks and products and yields, many times what we find is that there's uncertainty in the composition and quality about the feedstock and the product. I mean, feedstock, if it's wood chips, it's easier, but if we are talking about plastic waste or waste in general, then it's more complicated, right? So if the quality is not well defined, that creates a low confidence in the production yields, the quality, and for the investor, this will impact in the revenue predictability. So what would be the best practices? Then supply well documented with verified data sources, representative sampling, analysis from a laboratory, and multiple data points, right? Providing these documents, it would increase the confidence in the predictions and the quality and the revenue. Regarding the technical solution, many times we find a lack of design specifics and engineering documentation. Sometimes they want us to assess the technical viability of the solution, and they give it to us as a black box where we cannot see anything inside. Well, then that doesn't work. And it results in a low confidence on the design and the engineering team. So what is recommended is that to provide a complete engineering documentation, including the design assumptions and the redundancies in the plant and the philosophy behind that design. Right? If we go to mass and energy balances, that's also, usually we never see an energy balance provided for the plants, and the mass balances are most of the times not aligned with the actual plant design and conditions. Sometimes we get mass balances from lab scale setups or pilot scale plants that then, the configuration of those plants is not the same as the final plant. So, it helps if the mass balance is aligned with the plant design and with the plant operational conditions and some potential variations of different scenarios. Then, as I mentioned before by Pyreg, it's quite often that we don't get any information on responsibilities and O&M approach, right? And that ideally that should be defined, and it should be shown how the plan will be operated, what's the maintenance plan and philosophy, and who will take care of that, and contracted services. And then we also review the technical inputs to financial models, and many times, we just get some numbers there that are not they cannot be assessed, and they are not broken down into details, and they are not based on backed up data. So if the plant that the investor wants to get their money in exists, then a site visit is important. If it doesn't exist, then if there's a pilot scale plant, then it's also nice to visit because it provides first-hand insights, on the plant's operational conditions, on the equipment status, and overall efficiency of the plant. That we can not only see looking at the documents presented in a data room. We look at now we move from the technical due diligence to the commercial one. The commercial one has two parts. One is the target review, and the other one is going to be the market review. So what we look into the target review is mainly the feedstock and the offtake. So, and again, in these cases, we find similar problems. So for the feedstock, we usually see limited feedstock agreements with little specification on the existing agreements and unrealistic expectations on the feedstock availability, right? So then it gives a high uncertainty on the pricing and the feedstock quality. So what we would ideally like to see is that all feedstock agreements available with proper pricing based and linked to the quality of the feedstock. For the offtake, is a bit of the same. There's uncertainty on important parameters such as the pricing of biochar or bio-oil, limited offtake agreements, and sometimes an over-optimistic price estimations for the product. Right. So, best practices would be to get a clear definition on the pricing of the biochar and bio linked with the quality and composition, and then a list of the long-term offtake agreements. Because as mentioned before, banks want to see long-term offtake agreements. To complement this target review, then we also look into the market. We look into the feedstock market to identify potential feedstocks and define a catchment area. Then look into the supply chain and logistics to ensure that it's reliable, and the prices of the feedstock and the expected development. On the offtake side, then we'll look into the demand for these pyrolysis products, the market size and the expected growth for these projects, if there's any government policies, regulations, incentives that can apply to this specific project, and also look at the competitors, both in the local market and in the global market. So, and if possible, then it's good also to get an idea on how this plant would differentiate itself from the market, from the competitors. And all these findings end up in the business case, right, that it's developed. For the environmental and permitting due diligence, the approach is very variable. We've seen from just environmental screening, site selection, review gap analysis of existing documentation, red flags, to complete environmental site assessment with site visits. So it's important to keep in mind that the environmental aspects are regulated at regional level, and the permitting processes, involves different administrations. So it's recommended to have a fluent communication with the local authorities so you can provide a realistic time frame for the region where the project is located. Then again, when looking into the social response, the experience is that we find that most claims by third parties are due to noise, odors, or increased traffic in the residential area. And so it's important, if the project is at the early stages, to start with communication and engagement to ensure that these issues and these troubles can be avoided. And there's usually an overlapping between the technical due diligence and the environmental due diligence. Regarding environmental requirements on water supply, wastewater discharge, and then also on municipal urban planning. So, then to conclude, and first it's important to keep in mind that there's no one model that fits all projects, because there's different transactions. Can be a greenfield, a brownfield, one single asset, a portfolio in one market, in different markets. So but there's some focus elements that will make the best of a due diligence process. And here it comes my wish list. So for all those who are looking for investors, completeness of the virtual data room, that's really, really important. Because if there's not enough information, then the transaction is at a risk. So it's important to ensure that you have a complete package. So to strengthen the project team, right? And we've seen many times data rooms with 2,000 folders and 99% are empty, or with a lot of documents uploaded and very few that are useful ones. So only upload relevant documents, and have a clear structure of the virtual data room, right? That's going to help everybody to find the right documents, and you will prove that you are organized and that your project is under control. Then avoid conflicting information. I mean, we understand that the project evolves with time, but if there's changes in the design, it should be communicated, right? It doesn't help if there's different designs uploaded to the data room and then no one can figure out which one is the right one or the final one. So that should also be communicated, and reasonable assumptions in the business case, because investors also know their business. So it doesn't help if the assumptions in the business case are unrealistic, because then they will find out, and then it gives not a good impression that you know what you are talking about. So, and if you are an investor and looking into investing in a pyrolysis plant, we recommend that you find the right team that understands the market, the players, and has experience. And also, very important is to dedicate sufficient resources, because as I mentioned, this is a time-sensitive project. You run them in 6-8 weeks, so they are very intense projects that requires efforts from all parts, right? So information is received and needs to be assessed fast and answer questions fast. So you need to have enough people working in the project to ensure that that's possible. And of course, think about how you integrate this project into your pipeline or other existing projects. And yeah, and that's all for me. So if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very interesting, and we have time for questions. So questions from the audience, please. Any project developers with specific questions maybe, or plant operators who can confirm what Maria just said? Oh, here we go, sorry.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation. I was really interested in two things. One is, how long does it normally take to finish a due diligence process like this? Because it's very detailed, what you described. And do you also work with project developers to, when you identify improvement points, to help them improve it? Or do you not really do that?
Yes, I mean, when it's an investor, is usually, as I mentioned, 6 to 8 weeks. In our proposals, we always write 8 weeks. Then they come back and say, 6 weeks, we don't have more time. So usually, 6-8 weeks for a project. So if it's well organized and all the data is there, then it should be enough. And then, we also work with some developers, to help them. And then in that case, we do more like red flags on things that should be improved, and we also help them to improve. Yes.
Thank you very much. Another question, maybe? I don't see any hands. All right. That means we have an early finish. We're going to have a 15-minute break. We'll meet back here at 11:30 sharp. Thank you very much, and see you later.
rationnent les piles. Ça, par contre. Faut qu'ils achètent Ellipsis, faut qu'ils achètent des micros. Hein? Oui? Sorry? Do you know what the Wi-Fi password is? Sorry, I don't understand. The Wi-Fi password. Which Wi-Fi? No, I have no idea which was the password. Sorry. Bon, allez, moi. Test français, test français. Me comprends-tu, machine en français? Ah, c'était... Yeah. You're the first one to pass? Ok.
Ça, c'est l'anglais. Hein.
Oui, c'est ça qui veut tester. Donc là, je parle en français. Bonjour. J'aime beaucoup les baguettes. L'omelette, ouais. Ça a l'air de marcher. Ouais, ça fonctionne. Hein. T'as pas confiance?
Non, c'est parce que c'est
Oui. Mais c'est un peu cryptique. Je me demande s'il n'y a pas des petits problèmes au niveau de l'Internet. Parce qu'on est nombreux dessus. Ils ont des emmerdes dans toutes les salles, je crois. Ouais. C'est toujours un petit peu cryptique. Bonjour, bienvenue à tous au salon Biochar. Ça marche. Ouais, ça marche. If I speak English, how do you rock, little machine?
testing here in the English zone, and it seems to be working fine. But you have to be very careful with the mics because there is a lot of sound here, and when you keep French and English mics, there are some interferences. If you
Micro allumé en permanence, pas fort, mais il y a peut-être un léger fond.
all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up. The present has no rhythm. Your gift keeps on giving. What is this I'm feeling? If you wanna live, I'm with it. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. Supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up. She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up every sky. You just supernova and just light up. Out in the dark, I'm longing for your touch. But in the daylight, you will feel this much. Keep the illusion. Hold me through the night. When the sun rises, you'll be out of sight. You'll be out. I don't wanna just see you on the weekends. You know I got feelings. Stick around through the changing seasons. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. I don't wanna just see you on the weekends. You know I got feelings. Stick around through the changing seasons. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. Stay in this moment, frozen in time. Let the shadows dance. Let the stars align. If unwanted, I'll face the truth. But tonight, let me be with you. I don't wanna just see you on the weekends. You know I got feelings. Stick around through the changing seasons. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. I don't wanna just see you on the weekends. You know I got feelings. Stick around through the changing seasons. Tell me that you feel this too, too, too. Tell me that you.
All right, everybody. We are back after our break. Welcome to the Biochar panel of this morning. If our speakers from before the break would kindly show up on stage and take their seats. In the meantime, I'll introduce our next presentation, our next speaker. This would be Conor Layden of Arigna Fuels from Ireland. He is the commercial director of the Arigna Group, a fifth-generation family business, and he is actually a part of the fifth generation of this family business. He's located in the west of Ireland with his company, and they are transitioning from a fossil-based solid fuel manufacturer to a biochar manufacturer. The biochar will initially be used as a raw material substitute for their solid fuel, but ultimately they plan to manufacture and sell biochar for all the great uses and mainly to sequester carbon. In 2023, they installed their new biochar plant with a capacity to scale to 70,000 tons per year. Conor Layden, please come on stage, join me on stage, and let us hear from your perspective a rather different perspective than the perspective we've seen so far. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo. As I said, I'm Conor Layden. I'm the Commercial Director in Arigna Group, and we are the proud owners of one of Europe's largest operational biochar facilities. So in a previous life, I also worked as a credit analyst in a bank and in a commercial finance company, so I've experienced both sides of the funding landscape. So who are we? So Arigna Group is made up of two companies, Arigna Fuels and BL Fuels, and we have 5 sites across Ireland and the UK. And we're proudly headquartered in Arigna, County Roscommon, Ireland, which is a small mining village. We have 75 employees, we have 15 million turnover, and we are a 5th generation family business, and we now have some outside investment. So how do we get to where we are today? So Arigna has always been an evolving company as moved with the times and the current macro requirements of the time. So we started out in the early 1900s as a mining company, and mining coal for power plant production in the local area. However, as the coal deposits reduced and the technology evolved, this quickly became to a halt. And we decided we needed to make our first pivot, which was to a low smoke coal manufacture facility. So in the late 80s, early 90s, we developed an in-house patented 70,000 tonne per annum low smoke coal manufacturing facility, which produced domestic coal briquettes for the domestic solid fuel market in Ireland and the UK. Engineering was always at the forefront of the business, and in the mid-1990s, we developed wind farms on the old mining sites, which having manufactured over 1.4 million tonnes of our low smoke coal briquettes, we decided that we wouldn't be able to do that forevermore, and that things would have to change once more, and we set about our next pivot. We needed to create a renewable solid fuel replacement for our low smoke coal briquettes. After a lot of research, we decided that pyrolysis or torrefaction would do what we required. And that's what lead us to where we are today and why I'm here today effectively. And I'll tell you how we funded ourselves through that now in a minute. So how have we transitioned to being the largest biochar producer or one of the largest biochar producers in Europe? So in 2010, we did an awful lot of research, and we bought some small-scale lab equipment, pyrolysis equipment, and we hired some experts to run the equipment. After a couple of years of research of doing this, we then purchased a 1 tonne per hour pyrolysis reactor and developed our technology in-house to develop a pilot-scale plant. We ran this plant for a couple of years, refining it, almost burning it down, blowing it up, everything that you think, blocking it every second day, and used a lot of different biomass raw materials. But after a few years, we decided we could eventually produce a domestic solid fuel, or a biocoal. So the biocoal was called Harvest Flame. And in 2017, we sold our first biocoal briquettes on the Irish market. The important thing for us at the time was that the coal could be burnt in the same appliances as our customers who burnt our current solid fuels. So and another important requirement for us was that sustainability was huge. So we wanted to use agricultural residues as opposed to anything else. So olive pits became our main feedstock, which again are not grown in Ireland. Unfortunately, we don't have the climate for that. But for about 5 years, we ran the machine on a pilot scale plant. We sold the material, and then we decided that the market was big enough for an industrial scale plant. So we wanted to effectively phase out our full fossil fuel requirements. So in 2023, we took the brave decision to invest in a large 10 tonne per hour pyrolysis reactors. Again, this technology was developed in-house, and we purchased reactors and made all the bits around it ourselves. So that kind of leads us to where we are now, almost now where we are today. So our biochar plant was purchased in 2023 and built in 2023 and operational in late 2023. We sold our first biocoal from the plant at the end of the year, and we're still selling it today. Feedback has been very good on our product so far, but now we have lots and lots of raw material. We now need to be able to actually sell the product, so there's a bit of work involved in that. So this is our product for anyone that's interested, and you can see more on our websites. But one of the key things, I suppose, why we're here today is how do we fund ourselves to get to this point? So initially, because we had an underlying business, our initial investments were all through our own cash, effectively. So the company had built up a lot of cash reserves, And at a certain point in 2010, we decided that we'd take out no more dividends out of the company. So our strong underlying business performance ultimately purchased the R&D equipment and paid for the lab equipment effectively too. Our pilot plant was ultimately funded by the profitability of the business. However, at that point, it was fairly obvious that the next industrial plant investment was going to require too much cash. So we were required to go looking for external capital injections, and at that point we looked for a combination of debt and equity because it became very apparent that debt alone wouldn't do. So to scale up, what exactly did we do? So as I said before, at this point we came to our industrial plant was going to cost greater than what the cash reserves of the company had. So straight away we went looking for high street lenders because we had relationships with high street lenders from before. However, quickly they told us that because you're a fossil fuel company, they could not lend to us. So it became a very big roadblock immediately. Even though they liked the transition plan, they just didn't like the fact that we were still a fossil fuel company ultimately. We then looked to start talking to green debt funds and green debt transition funds, and they found it difficult because of the fossil fuel element again. So that kind of led us down to looking for hybrid debt funds. So green funds that effectively were looking to fund transitions, and we're happy to understand that you did have a fossil fuel element of it. Following on from that, it became apparent that we were required to put in some equity investment alongside the hybrid debt capital. So our existing shareholders all went back into their pockets and gave some money, and we also took in some new green-minded equity investors. So these were individuals based in Ireland who were interested in funding a green story effectively. So I suppose we encountered an awful lot of challenges, and people would be interested in them. Some of them have already been discussed before. The capital cost of an industrial scale plant is significant, and it's higher numbers than we would have dealt with in the past. We were a fossil fuel company, and we don't hide that fact. But however, we are transitioning. Biochar is effectively a new industry. I know it's been around for a long time, but there's no obvious industry that is using lots and lots of biochar. So there's a lot of work required to actually create the industry. There is technological risk. I suppose we got around that by building our pilot plant and proving it. It did take an awful lot of time, but the technological risk is significant. The market uncertainty is fairly obvious. So funders obviously like obvious markets and where you're going to sell your product. There isn't huge obvious markets. Again, then it's a complicated product. Sitting down explaining it to a funder is not that easy. What it does, carbon sequestration, it's not a simple, straightforward thing. And then the feedstock. So, and unfortunately in Ireland we don't have a lot of readily available dry biomass. So we had to go externally and look for dry biomass sources. So how do we overcome these challenges? So the first thing is the company had a clear transition plan. So yes, we were a fossil fuel company, but we did have an obvious route to go for 100% green. We had an addressable market, and this is probably the key thing. So we had identified a solid fuel, domestic solid fuel market in Ireland and the UK, and we just had to move that product to have a biochar raw material element. The market was established, and we have been selling domestic solid fuel products for a long time. So this would allow us effectively to move into the biochar market, albeit we wouldn't go straight to biochar, we go to biocoal initially. We did spend an awful lot of time on our pilot plant, so refining our plant, deciding what was best, what feedstocks works best. Olive pits work best for us because they were easy to briquette. They also have low moistures, they're readily available, and they're easily transported. And then finally, we had an innovative team. So we've proven through our history of the business that we can evolve and move and develop engineering projects as required. And this was a key element for funders. So I suppose the takeaways that we have, so what the funders look for, I know there's a list put up earlier of 10. I'm assuming the rest of those things are in place, but the three key things for us were an offtake agreement or an established market. So you need to have an addressable offtake agreement or an addressable market that's there, that's obvious, that can be used. You need to prove your technology. So you have to have operated a pilot scale plant, or you have to buy an off-the-shelf Pyreg machine and them help you set it up effectively. Or you have to have a readily available feedstock. So ideally you have a cheap, free feedstock that is located in your area, that's an agri-waste, or else you can go find one that is available. And for us, the funders require all three. Without any of these three, you're kind of wasting your time in our view. So that's pretty much a short presentation. We are located behind everyone at the stand there. We have two people, Siobhan and Rob, and we'll happily answer any questions that you have later on today. So, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Conor. What a transition from coal mining to biochar production. I mean, this is basically coming full circle. Great story to market it, probably.
Yeah.
I've always been thinking about doing that for the German coal companies as well to, get them involved in this field. But it's good to see that it's actually being done somewhere. Other questions from the audience? Questions for Conor? Don't be shy. No questions. All right, then we'll save them for the debate later on. Thank you very much, Conor. All right, this brings us to our next speakers. Our next speakers will be Alexia Crespo and Jean-Christophe Leger Alexia Crespo is from the Accelium Conseil, and Jean-Christophe Leger is from the CEO of Thermovia and the founder of Thermovia. Please join me on stage. Oh, there you are. Alexa, Jean-Christophe couldn't make it?
Yeah, it could be here, but it's 10 minutes.
Right. Okay.
So maybe we can
We'll give him a couple minutes to get here, and yeah, no problem. All right. Please bear with us while we take another 2 minutes till the time that I communicated with them. I didn't expect to finish early. In the meantime, I'll introduce Alexia to you. Alexia Crespo is the general manager of Accelium Conseil, where she leads strategic development and helps businesses secure public funding for innovation and growth. With a solid scientific background, she specialized in structuring financing strategies tailored to the industrial and technological project. She's a graduate of École Centrale de Lyon and started her career in research and development, earning a PhD in surface physiochemistry applied to lubricants. She later took on leadership roles in the cosmetics industry, overseeing innovation and formulation teams. In 2020, she transitioned into public funding consultancy, assisting industrial and tech companies in obtaining grants and subsidies. Today, as general manager of Accelium Conseil, she leverages her dual expertise in science and finance to help companies navigate the complexities of public funding and secure financial support for their projects. Give a big hand for Alexa, please. Let's see if Jean-Christophe is inside somewhere. Are you going to have the presentation together? Okay, so we'll wait for him then. All right. Right. Quick reorganization of the whole thing. We are going to switch or swap basically presentations. We will now be hearing Josh Dalby, the global head of research and development for Ricardo, with his presentation. And I think the presentation's already up. So thank you very much for joining me on stage and filling in basically while we wait for our other speakers to arrive. Josh is the global head of research and development in Ricardo's automotive and industrial business. He's holding a Master in Engineering from King's College, Cambridge. And Josh joined Ricardo as a graduate engineer in 2008, and throughout his career, he has specialized in complex projects demanding innovation, research and development, and the integration of new technologies. His expertise spans areas such as electric vehicles, hydrogen propulsion, and greenhouse gas removal technologies, and this is probably why he's here on stage with us today. Josh, please take it away. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Is this on? Yeah. Yes, nice to meet you all. Happy that I'm not doing the last presentation before lunch, so it's a nice opportunity to swap. I'm going to talk to you about oh, louder. Is it on? I think it's on, but is that better? Can we have a bit more? Better? Okay. I'm going to talk to you about experiences in deploying technology demonstrator projects, but it's really related and relevant to some of the other topics touched on by the speakers here. So yeah, if we can, oh, how do I do this? Is it this one that's working? Green. Great. Okay. So just very briefly about Ricardo, we are a global strategic environmental and engineering consultancy company. We have existed for over 100 years, primarily in the transportation sector and moving into the energy sector. We develop sustainable solutions for those kind of different applications and develop them and then take them to market with our customers. We have more than 3,000 people and 2,500 live projects at any one time. I'm going to talk to you about my experiences running one of these projects. It's related to the UK government's DAC and GGR innovation programme that started a few years ago, and that's funded 15 technology demonstrator projects across a few different technology areas. So they're not kind of pinning all their hopes on one particular technology. They're investing in lots of different areas, primarily focused on helping the UK meet the estimated shortfall of 40 megatons of CO2 by 2050. So that's what we need to try and abate or remove through various technologies. Obviously, the UK government's also investing to try and help UK companies develop such technologies and then export them to other countries as well. So I was the chief engineer on the Biochar project, which was one of those 15 demonstrator projects. That was led by us. We developed some of the technology working with some partners, but we also did all of the planning and permitting, the site installation, the operation, maintenance, etc. So I'm going to talk to some of those areas, particularly on planning and permitting, and related to this project experience, but I know that some of the other projects also suffered with similar challenges as well. Some of it may well be related to the UK regime, so bear with me, I'm not a planning expert in any other country. I'm not even a planning expert in the UK, but I'll tell you what we encountered, some of the challenges that we had, and hopefully it'll be beneficial for your projects. So just to set the scene, just so you understand the nature of what we're trying to do, the Biochar technology incorporates both biochar production and CO2 capture with a CO2 extraction system. I will be speaking more about it tomorrow in the BioHorizons room 10 to 11, so I won't go into the details too much here. But just to outline that we've got the 4 outputs: heat, biochar, electricity, and then CO2 capture and storage. So it incorporates lots of different things. Clearly, all of these demonstrator projects were new technologies, so they're all trying to deploy something which hasn't been done before. In our case, this is the combination of biochar production and CO2 capture at the same point. So just to give you a quick overline of the timeline of the project, all of the projects were less than 3 years. Ours was about 2.5-year project, which is quite short, especially when you've got to find a site, get it set up, get everything designed, procured, assembled, operating. So pretty tight. We started in May 22 and we completed our testing for the government in October 24. So just wrapped up everything on that side. And you can see the kind of rough timeline there. On the left-hand side, the bits in red, you can see we agreed a lease in principle with the building owner. And we submitted then planning and permitting applications very soon after that. We were expecting, maybe naively, we were expecting that we would hear on the planning decision a few months after that, and the permitting decision maybe slightly further down the line. What we actually achieved was the planning decision was delayed for various reasons that I'll touch on before by about 6 months, which coincides with one of the previous speakers expecting those kind of delays. And the initial timing that we were advised from the Environment Agency for the permitting decision was 15 months later than we thought, and would have arrived before or after the end of the project, basically. So not really compatible with the timeline. Fortunately, because our project was government funded through a different government department, they were able to pull some favours, and we did manage to accelerate that process. We still achieved the permit decision about 6 months later than we thought we would, but at least it was still compatible when we were getting the plant up and running. So why did we have those delays? So on the permitting side, in the UK, I think the biggest challenge was that the determination of the permit centred around the use of novel technology and in the context of an R&D project. Our permitting regime isn't really set up for those considerations. It's all set up about installing a known technology in a place and operating that continuously. There was no provision for a time-limited permit. We couldn't say, we're only going to be here for 2 or 3 years. Can you just give us permission for that time? Assessments are all based on the lifetime impact of the plant or the annual impact based on continuous operation, which was not what we were planning to do because we were evaluating various options. Novel technology doesn't fit into an existing category. When you start talking to the Environment Agency about a pyrolysis unit producing biochar, they ask you questions about a medium combustion plant that runs on coal. It's very, very different. They also want to see manufacturer data, which when you're trying to prove out a new technology that doesn't exist, you can't give them the data. You can only give them what your expectation is. They also have the kind of best available technology basis. So for CO2 capture systems within our plant, that's all based on very large scale carbon capture systems based on primarily on gas plants in the UK. What we're doing is much, much smaller. You can see the kind of comparison. So what we're doing is very, very different to a large scale system, and therefore some of the things they're recommending as best practice really don't really apply practically. And even then, in terms of processing some of the, or determining some of the impacts of the solvents in use, these solvents for CO2 capture systems are still being developed by lots of manufacturers. Clearly, some of them do exist already and are known, but actually the understanding the human impact of them and occupational health levels, etc., the Environment Agency was still consulting people on how to derive the methodology to assess that while we were trying to get a permit in place. So that was a challenge, several challenges. Then on the planning side, I think maybe we were naive in expecting that everyone would support this kind of project. And actually we had a lot of objections from locals. And I would say most of that is based on lack of understanding of the information that's presented in the process. So, for example, the planning officer recommended that even though the air quality impact isn't for them to determine, because that was for the Environment Agency to determine, she recommended that we include that in the planning application, and that caused a lot of issues because people didn't understand a technical analysis report. And also the recommended permit was a specific waste incineration permit, which leads to all sorts of connotations that are not very helpful. So there's a massive gap really between what the locals perceived we were trying to do and the actual truth of what we're doing. So first example, it's a waste permit. Everyone thinks we're going to be dealing with something on the left-hand side, and actually we were dealing with very clean waste biomass. The air quality assessment, a stack will emit a plume of pollutants into the village and across the golf course. Many businesses on the site will be seriously impacted. and actually all the data, following established methodology and process, showed there was a negligible impact on the surrounding area, and that was based on very, very conservative assumptions of what we were going to be emitting. This continued to a few other areas. Will likely cause light pollution, even though the plans showed there were no external modifications to the building, no lights being installed, and we were only operating in the daytime. Will generate noise when an independent noise assessment showed that it would be imperceptible at the nearest dwelling, so completely not audible. Will cause road safety issues when an independent transport assessment showed the level of traffic was likely to be unnoticeable because it's a very small plant. So despite presenting all of this information and independent assessment, there's still a massive gap between what the local objectors kind of perceived of the project versus what we're actually trying to do. Oh, another one, sorry. Will adversely impact scenic beauty, even though you can't actually see the building. It's in a cutting, so you can't see it from any nearby roads. And we were not changing the ridge height at all of the building. So again, just a complete mismatch. So I guess one thing that maybe we might expand a bit further in the panel session was during the project, there's a kind of organization called Core CO2RE based in the UK, government funded. And while these demonstrator projects were running, they started to create an evaluation framework for these projects in lots of different areas. But in the social area, they came up with a kind of list of 12 questions to sort of evaluate your project against and score it against. And they're a little bit subjective, but basically if you scored kind of 12 out of 12, you should expect that the public should broadly be on board with your proposal. And the lower the score, then the more chance of objection you would have. So we evaluated ourselves against this kind of after all the planning application process had happened, and scored 5 out of 12, which obviously indicated that there were some areas where actually better engagement with the public earlier on, which I think is what Maria was highlighting in her presentation, that might have really helped us. I think we were a bit naive in terms of expecting that people would support this kind of project, and that caught us off guard and led to these delays, which we did eventually managed to navigate, but I think if we were to do the same project again, we would take a different approach early on based on that. If you'd like to find out more, we're on J29, which is just over there, so feel free to come along and chat to me another time. Great, thanks.
Thank you very much, Joshua. Very interesting insights in your project development experience. Have you heard about German bureaucracy by any chance?
I haven't. No, is it similarly fun?
It's really a striking similarity right there. I'm pretty sure Jan of Pyreg can tell you lots of stories about that. It seems to be very similar issues. We'll dive deeper into that later on during our discussion. But now I would like to open up the stage for questions. Are there questions from the audience for Joshua? We seem to have a very timid audience today. No questions at all. Okay, well, there's one. Thank you very much.
Hi, that's very loud. I'm Varsha from Offstream. I'm just curious, after going through this process, are you seeing any permitting reform or like streamlining that other folks doing pyrolysis are now doing in the UK?
I don't know if anything's happened just yet. The two government departments involved in our project, it was funded by DESNZ, Department of Energy, Security and Net Zero, and the planning and permitting goes through DEFRA, which is the Department of Farm, Rural Agriculture, something like that. Because we face these challenges, but also 14 out of the other 14 projects also face similar challenges, there was some coordination between those two government departments to try and feed back some of the challenges that happened into DEFRA so they could maybe start considering how to do it. I don't know if there's been any concrete changes just yet. Government things like that take a long time. There was talk about, I think there might be provision now for R&D permits or time-limited permits, or at least it's being discussed. So maybe it would help in the demonstration side, not so much on a commercial pyrolysis project that I'm aware of, at least.
Thank you very much. Did this maybe spark another question? No more questions? All right. Thank you very much, Josh. Please take a seat. We'll get back to you with our discussion later on. And now, again, a little earlier than expected, but finally, Alexis Crespo and Jean-Christophe Leger. All right, I'll reintroduce you real quick. Thanks for joining me on stage. Thank you. Alexis Crespo is the general manager of Accelium Conseil, where she leads strategic development and helps businesses secure public funding for innovation and growth. With a solid scientific background, she specialized in structuring financing strategies tailored to industrial and technological projects. She's a graduate of École Centrale de Lyon. She started her career in research and development, earning a PhD in surface physiochemistry applied to lubricants. This led her to later taking on leadership roles in the cosmetics industry, where she oversaw innovation and formulation teams. In 2020, she transitioned into the public funding consultancy, assisting industrial and tech companies in obtaining grants and subsidies. And today, as general manager of Accelium Conseil, she leverages her dual expertise in science and finance to help companies navigate the complexities of public funding and secure financial support for their projects. Very important tasks and in high demand, I would suppose. This brings me to our next speaker after her, or are you going to do it as a joint presentation? All right, let me introduce you then real quick. Jean-Christophe Leger is an entrepreneur and a leading expert in biomass pyrolysis and biochar valorization. His entrepreneurial journey began in 2002 with the creation of Temotech, an incubator dedicated to researching biochar properties and its industrial applications. In 2010, he founded La Carbonnerie, specializing in biochar production for industries such as agriculture and metallurgy. Recognizing the growing challenges of biomass supply and the need for advanced pyrolysis technology, he established Tomovia in 2023. The company designs and manufactures cutting-edge industrial solutions for biochar production, helping industries optimize pyrolysis processes and enhance biochar utilization. Thanks for joining us on stage as well. And without further ado, please, let's hear from you.
Hello. I don't know if it's enough. Hi. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, great. So today I will, the presentation didn't, oh, sorry. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I haven't your presentation.
What? Yes, but not available right now. Oh, there is a problem with the presentation?
He doesn't have it.
No.
But he had it before, didn't he?
Oh. On est là depuis tout à l'heure, ils auraient pu nous le dire, on avait une clé USB avec. Ouais, si vous voulez.
Well, while waiting from slides, I will just introduce Thermovia. It's an enterprise that I've founded in 2023 after 24 years of experience of producing and selling biochar from 202, and I find for the 21st years that the biochar market was not ready to buy this product, so I waited. While one of the applications could be ground application, could be industry, could be cosmetics, and so on, ready to develop and at a huge level this product. So I waited, and I waited for 20 years. And then in 2021, from scratch, everything. The demand grows very, very fast in any area, industry, grand application, and so on. So I had to move to another business model, since the use was not anymore an issue. What is now an issue is the sourcing, having enough raw material to develop the process and the equipment. So now my business model, the Thermovia business model, is found in access from the biomass to the market. And we had two markets. One market is making producing equipment to help the producer, crop producer, to make biochar, crude biochar, and then so we sell equipment, and then we sell also products, so biochar, to the end use. And in between, we transform the crude biochar in raffinate biochar, which is stabilization, functionalization, and so on. So we had those two markets now, and it tried to grow fast. As I told you, this plant started 2 years ago, and now it grows very fast, since we are focused on end use and not on equipment or on biochar producing. Thank you. Is it okay? Okay. Let's start. So let's continue a bit. In order to increase the value, we work on research to develop new product, new biochar, we call it biocarbon, since we say biochar is for ground application and biocarbon is for any applications. So we develop product with higher and higher value to help all the any part of the value at the chain to get money, because environmental, this project is very interesting. It has also been interesting economically speaking. So we developed new product via research for continuously adding value in biochar, and also develop right now a product for bio oil. We developed separation bio oil for green chemistry for producing acetic acid, aromatics, and so on, by the condensation of the fumes of the pyrolysis unit. That's it.
Thank you very much. And I think we've now solved the technical problems with the presentation. So, Alexia, please take it away.
Sorry for the delay. So, as you know, we have a problem of global warming, and we need to find solution to limit it. So there is some group of intergovernmental panel of climate change experts that have set some objective of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So it is not enough to limit the production and limit our consumption. So they have highlight that negative emission technology is a promising opportunity to limit the global warming. What is a negative emission technology? Is technology and solution who allow to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and to store it during long period like that, the carbon dioxide do not contribute to greenhouse effect. So biochar is recognized since several years by the group of experts as a negative emission technology, because for example, for soil amendment, it can durably sequestration. You have properties of sequestration of carbon dioxide in the soil, and also you have some good properties to enhance the fertility and the health of soil. But biochar have many other applications for the industry. For example, it can be used in cosmetic and personal care. So it can be used in the face mask, in toothpaste, because it have a really good porosity properties, and it allows to absorb toxin and lot of sorry, molecule, and like that it can be used instead of carbon from fossil things. It can be used also in industrial applications. It can be used in metallurgy, fireworks, chemical industry. It can be used also incorporated in building material as concrete or asphalt. It improves strength and durability, and it also allows to lock in carbon. It is also explored in additive in plastic and composite to enhance their properties. And it is really known also in filtration and decontamination, where he have, with his high porosity, he can absorb lot of contaminant, heavy metal, and organic polluant, and he make it a sustainable alternative to activated carbons. But despite his really high power, there is still barrier to the widespread and adoption of biochar in different area. One of the barrier is it is hard to scaling up this production and this use. There is still high cost of industrial infrastructure to a large production of biochar, and we need to more characterize the biochar and to find more application for using it in a different area. There is also intense international competition. There is a lot of investment in Asia or North America, so we need to invest in France to be part of the competition. And there is also some overcoming about regulatory and societal hesitation of using the biochar in different applications. So this is why French public funding can be a way to improve the deployment of biochar in France. Public funding could be used for different type of projects. For example, for research and development and innovation. This grant can be used for helping developing knowledge on biochar, or to develop efficient equipment to enable the optimization of the valorization of biochar, and to minimize the energy consumption during the production of biochar. But also there is some grant that can be done for productive investment. For example, for production of biochar with biomass of a company, or to buy some equipment to modify the process of production and using biochar instead of carbon from fossil origin. As you can see in this slide, there is many innovation funding public in France, so to help the research and innovation. So we start with BPI France, so it's a French public investment bank that offer really various funding mechanisms, starting with the grant for early stage project is a Bourse French Tech Emergence. And there is other support in function of the project technological maturity, if it's feasibility, development of industrialization, there is different range of support, and in function of the budget of the project also. But there is also more regional programs. Region offer financial aids to encourage local innovation, helping business development and testing new technologies. There is also European programs. So the European Union offer highly competitive funding opportunities. These grants are designed for projects with strong innovation and high degree of technology advancement. And to finish, there is research and innovation tax credit. This mechanism allows companies to recover a portion of their R&D expenses, making the long-term research more viable. But as I said before, there is also some grant for helping company to buy some equipment for production of biochar or using biochar in our own process. So, as you can see in the slide, the map of the France, there is a lot of programs offered by region, so it depends on the region where the project is, and because there is different priorities from the region, so they help to modernize and to expand their production, but there is different priorities. It depends on the region of the project. There is also national program. There is a France 2013 plan that include funding for industrialization of the France, such as Première Usine Open Call, which supports creation of new production line for innovative products. So it could be like innovative production of biochar and innovative production of product with biochar. So I don't know if you have said all that you, yeah, you can.
Well, we'll just speak again on whatever I said before. Just simply, we've got Thermovia have got 4 applications, and the first one is four steps. The first one is scientific, is research, and this point is very helpful from Accelium, which help us to find fundings, and we've got also to develop our process, to develop our the product and the pyrolysis in general. We have, we say, research. We've got also lab tests for new product. If we find a new crops, and we try to pyrolyze it and find the market for these crops. And then we've got, as I told before, selling equipment. Once we found the market for that crops, equipment for a producer or a collector of crops. And then we also are in the market of end products. So we sell biochar, we sell biocarbon in different applications due to the specificity of any crops that our partners, producer, develop. In a few words, we'll see what kind of fundings we could have. In first part is innovation, as I said before, and then we also have fundings for equipment acquisitions and industrial developments, which is in next steps. We already had some fundings, like both French for starting projects of pyro distillations, which mix pyrolyse and distillation, which help to collect and separate upfront all the molecules to get new activity and new products from the bio oil. And we also develop add fundings, regional fundings, and also first development startups and so on. Yeah, and c'est fini? Okay. Okay, thank you. If you want some more information about what is the work, what is the aim of Thermovia, you can join us at the stand H44. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I will finish
Alexia.
with some word for Accelium. So we are a consulting firm based in Tours, but we work across all the France for helping our clients to find the best funding option for their project. We guide them to choose the right support, help them to prepare the application, of course, and make the process easier so that they can save time and focus on growing our own business. Thank you for attention, and we stay on stage for questions.
Once again, thank you very much, Alexia and Jean-Christophe. Other questions from the audience? We have one over here.
Yes, I have a question regarding the biochar made of digestate. I think it's the process of digestate. Is that correct? Can I? Yeah.
Digestate. Okay.
Yeah.
Digestate is quite specific pyrolysis. We didn't focus on this since quite difficult to find a market on this biochar. We focus first on a pure, simple raw material as let's say one type of wood, which say oak or wood chips, and specific wood chips from oak. It's different markets than from resins and so on. Digest is quite complicated. So we can find a market, but there will be a lower value. We didn't have, we haven't yet been asked for this, but we can we can check. But I don't think, with my experience, that it will be the best way to find the biggest value of the market.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you very much. And another question right here.
Je vais peut-être parler en français. Est-ce que vous pouvez développer un petit peu plus sur le sujet des huiles biologiques que vous développez là?
Vous m'entendez? Oui. Alors, les huiles biologiques, oui. Alors, pour répondre à votre question, c'est un sujet épineux. Les huiles, c'est très complexe. C'est très complexe parce que quand on fait une pyrolyse, on obtient une centaine, 150 molécules différentes. Si on veut séparer une molécule de ce jus, c'est juste une usine à gaz. Ça s'est fait dans le temps. Vous avez des entreprises qui ont fait ça il y a déjà une centaine d'années. C'est un petit peu le précurseur de la pétrochimie. La chimie du bois, c'était précurseur. Donc ça existait. On sait faire, on peut faire. Mais c'est extrêmement compliqué. Et aujourd'hui, peu de gens savent faire. Alors, dans mon ancienne vie, j'étais dans une entreprise qui faisait ça, qui s'appelait Usine Lambiotte. Elle faisait de la séparation des huiles pour sortir des arômes, des alcools, des acides, tout un tas de molécules. Très compliqué, une usine à gagne. Et je me suis dit, si on veut développer quelque chose de simple, avec les agriculteurs, avec les collecteurs de déchets, si on veut développer quelque chose de simple, qui fonctionne et qui donne de la valeur, il faut valoriser ces huiles, mais il faut les obtenir différemment. Et le procédé qu'on utilise et qu'on a breveté, c'est de la pyrodistillation. C'est un mot qui n'existe pas, qu'on a inventé. En fait, on associe de la pyrolyse et on fait tout de suite de la distillation parce que les molécules vont sortir à des températures différentes de la pyrolyse. Donc on va faire des paliers de température dans la pyrolyse et on va sortir 3, 4, 5 molécules. On les sort, on les enlève. Ensuite, on fait un deuxième palier. On sort 3, 4, 5 autres molécules. Et elles sont déjà séparées. Donc après, il faut les purifier. Il y a encore tout un travail. Mais un travail plus facile, plus simple et qui génère plus de valeur que de faire de la pyrolyse et puis de la distillation ou de la séparation des molécules d'intérêt. Après, vous allez me dire, mais oui, mais sur 150 molécules, vous allez en trouver 3, 4, 5, 10 qui vont avoir un intérêt et les autres, on en fait quoi? C'est tout simple. Notre métier, c'est de développer des produits matières. Si on ne peut pas, on en fait l'énergie. Toutes les molécules qu'on n'aura pas réussi à développer aujourd'hui, eh bien, on peut les utiliser comme source d'énergie. Source d'énergie pour notre pyrolyse ou source d'énergie pour d'autres activités. Source d'énergie qui va être sous phase liquide. Ça veut dire qu'elle peut être utilisée en énergie après. Pas comme dans la pyrogasification, on est obligé d'utiliser l'énergie calorifique tout de suite. Est-ce que j'ai été clair? Oui?
Pardon, c'était pas Dupont de Nemours qui travaillait là-dessus, non?
Oui, Dupont de Nemours, on travaille dessus depuis des années. Et en fait, c'était un peu un parallèle avec Usine Lambiotte, qui était mon ancien employeur. On travaillait ensemble dessus, oui.
Very much. We have another question over here to the left.
Thank you very much. Question related to this first one, maybe in French.
Yep.
Vous avez parlé justement des jus pyréligneux et l'ensemble des composés phénoliques qui sont très complexes à séparer par la suite.
Oui.
Mais moi, je pense dans cette philosophie de valorisation des déchets, est-ce que le marché de vinaigre de bois ne peut pas justement être une alternative parce qu'il y a une demande? Et puis aussi, c'est peut-être moins complexe de séparer les composés un à un. Merci.
Alors le vinaigre de bois, alors après il y a différentes écoles. Le vinaigre de bois, il y a plusieurs noms. Souvent le vinaigre de bois, on dit c'est le jus pyrolygneux, l'ensemble du mélange qui fait du vinaigre de bois. Là c'est compliqué, sincèrement, parce que vous allez avoir des goudrons, vous allez avoir une phase liquide, vous avez une phase huileuse, compliqué. Pour faire simple, effectivement, on a la possibilité déjà de séparer en 3 familles. La famille des goudrons, la famille des huiles et la famille des liquides. Et ça, c'est pas très compliqué. Si on arrive à trouver des valorisations et des marchés sur ces produits-là, pourquoi pas? Alors il en existe, par exemple sur la partie des goudrons, on peut l'utiliser comme appétant dans la chasse pour les sangliers, on peut l'utiliser comme désinfectant pour les sabots. Effectivement, il y a des marchés, mais vous allez être sur des marchés microscopiques. Alors, comme le projet est de développer de manière très importante ces activités-là, il faut que ce soit des marchés de gros volume. Par exemple, l'acide acétique, qui est un produit qui est obtenu sur la pyrolyse de toutes les biomasses. Toutes les biomasses vont générer de l'acide acétique. Donc on va le récupérer, et en grande quantité. Ce n'est pas une grosse valeur ajoutée, mais si on le sépare, si on le valorise, on sait qu'il y a un marché. Et le marché est énorme aujourd'hui. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, l'acide acétique est surtout produit de synthèse. Donc là, on sort de l'acide acétique naturel. J'ai répondu à votre question?
Much.
Merci.
Are there any other questions? If not, then yes, please.
Thank you. On the topic you were discussing on this bio-oil.
Bio-oil, yes.
Is this the pyrolignitic acid so called?
But, I said, beg your pardon, can you repeat your question?
We are talking about condensing some of the gases.
Yes.
Correct. So in the fields, the farmers, they call it as wood vinegar.
Wood vinegar, yeah, that's it.
So in fact, I think the scientific name on it is pyrolignitic acid.
Pyrolytic acid, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's 40% acetic acid, so it's a pyrolytic acid. Okay, that's
So
right.
at least they use as fertilizer, diluting it, of course, 1 to 10 or 1 to 15.
Yes, yes, but we have to get deeply in the research for this, because yes, we found that it could help in sometimes for farmers to for increasing the effect of I don't know.
Against insects, maybe.
Yeah, but what we don't know yet is which molecule helps to do this. Our job is to find the good molecules and then to collect, separate, concentrate, and then we have the concentration of the formula required for this application.
Thank you.
Because if we get to many molecules, we don't know. Well, we don't know. Once it works, the second time it don't work because it's not exactly the same formula. If we separate and get the right molecules, it's okay. It will work each time and very concentrate. And then the other molecules are not used for this application. For instance, for a farmer's application, could be used for another application, which could have more value.
All right, thank you very much. This was a deep dive into applications of not only the hard biochar, but also the liquid elements that can be extracted from pyrolysis. I'd like to go back to what we initially talked about, and I'd like to open this as a discussion involving all of you, the major topic being financing mechanisms. In our first presentation today, we heard from Robin Clemens that one of his solutions to procuring financing and funding for projects would be packaging of projects, because most of the biochar projects are not large enough to be interesting for the bigger financial world, obviously. Robin, is this also something that goes in the direction of cooperatives, basically, like a biochar cooperative? Similar to an agricultural cooperative, where you basically pitch your business and also your operational capabilities in order to become larger and thus more interesting. Is that something you would argue is go?
That's something we haven't discussed yet, or there wasn't a specific interest in this, because currently we're not yet at a market level. Everything is still project-based. So even in packaging projects together, it's not that it just has all these tick boxes fulfilled that we discussed today, like offtake agreements, having a specific supplier for the machine. It's still looking into each project individually, because there are still concerns for any investor with regards to reputational risk. I would say institutional finance focuses on the secondary mover advantage. So in the future, yes, I think aggregating at higher levels, different forms of organizations makes sense. Currently, how we see this is more in the top core level from one project developing entity, where most project developers that operate at commercial scale, they have different sites, different locations, sometimes even different countries. So the answer there is yes. But as we see it in the agriculture sector, we're not there as of today. But aggregating is clearly a thing. And I think this will be more true for smaller scale projects rather than larger scale projects, like artisanal biochar as an example. I mean, currently it's very, very challenging to get debt finance for these, but also you might not need it. But if you would aggregate together thousands of these smallholder farmers, then yes, that might be an approach to it. But then the operation And the monitoring of such investment becomes so difficult because then you need to KYC, worst case, 1,000 different entities. It's just driving up transaction costs too high. So currently it's more looking at a topco, and to start with, it's usually a topco starts with one project. Sometimes they have more than one project, but it's packaging. We look at standardization on certain elements. For example, that only certain methodologies are included, so you don't need to underwrite all methodologies of all standards. You could say we only support and just see them EBC. You don't only need to understand the EBC methodology, and you don't care about pure isometric, reverse, Vera, and all the others. So there are attempts to standardizing and taking out complexities, but not yet at the organizational level.
Thank you very much. My next question is going to be for you, Paul, because this kind of ties into what Robin said. You mentioned that what I find surprising, that procuring finance was only the second biggest problem. The biggest problem would be the biochar marketing. Does that maybe have something to do with the size of your company, that you're basically involved in 15 operating companies worldwide, that you've sort of reached this critical mass where you have become interesting for bigger finance industry? Or is this something that was initially a problem, but over the time where you develop more and more projects and plans has become less and less of a problem because you've basically established relations, built up trust, and thus found it easier to procure finance?
It's a good question. I was a little surprised actually by that result, that financing wasn't the number one, but in a way it implicitly is, because if you're struggling to find buyers for the product, you will struggle to finance it. And even though many of the companies that we're working with are actually in production and have been so for several years, they're still looking to finance further growth. That's where models like Kumo's are very interesting for companies that already have a track record to show and have a history of successfully producing and selling biochar. But yeah, it's a good observation, and but it's very much symptomatic of the fact that it's difficult to find long-term offtake agreements for physical biochar in particular.
Thank you very much. Jan, what do you think about that? Is that a problem Pyreg has run into with their project developments, or where would you see one of the major problems really for project development?
For our projects, because the capex cost on the Pyreg machine are on the high side, right? So you're talking a couple million euros investment at best, even for the medium-sized projects. That's not easy to finance in any way today in the biochar markets. So I was talking about those 4 levers that you need to really focus on. So your feedstock cost, ideally even revenue, the biochar market, credit revenue, carbon removal credit revenue, and energy revenues that you get. Those are really very important to put together. But to really answer your question, I think most of our projects today are financed as one-offs, and it's a capital raise starting with equity and pocket money, family, friends very often. Then a bit of debt, some grants, and then leveraging carbon credits in a way. It's really a mix of everything they can put together. We have a couple of large corporate clients, so that's completely different. They have existing credit lines they can just step into, like you were talking about that as well. They just need to believe that it makes sense within their business model. Yeah. So an example is a client we have in Florida, Florida Crystals. They produce sugar, and they are now processing the sugarcane into biochar that they use on their own crops, right? And they see the benefits of the biochar they make directly. They tried to purchase biochar from the market previously, got extremely disappointed, despite that biochar actually being certified, because there are volatiles in it, and they couldn't use it on their crops. Their agronomist told them, no way. So they said, okay, the only way to do it properly is we're going to do it ourselves. So those are the other examples. Allow me one more. What I'm working on right now with my team is to try to actually talk to these large banks and bring them down to our level a little bit. Not have the expectation that the first project will be $100 million. That's just not going to work at this stage of the industry. It might for very specific one-off somewhere. So one of them actually is just about to establish a special investment committee specifically for us, when they would be able to take investment decisions outside of their normal framework. Just because how interested they are in biochar, we've been talking to them for more than a year now. They've done all the due diligence on us, and now it's about to make the decision to do that, right? So that would be one of the first examples where they would kind of start talking to us at an eye level, as opposed to always talking about securities and how do we, create setups that I don't even understand to finance very large-scale projects. So that's what I see. Try to find the right people to work with you and convince them that you're good enough already for their level.
Thank you very much. Very interesting approach, which is actually not exactly the opposite, but not very similar to what Robin does, where he takes the finance world as it is and tries to see how we can fit biochar into their world. You're basically trying to reverse it and see how you can fit their, or how you can reduce their expectations a little bit and thus fit them into our world. I think both have a place in this region, and we see this on very different levels. For example, we mentioned earlier commissioning of plants. You ran into trouble because of emissions all of a sudden being a factor, because of the commission itself, being the plant being commissioned as a waste incinerator. Let me tell you this from the German perspective, this is a pain we very much feel as well, because most pyrolysis plants in Germany are actually commissioned as waste incineration plants. And in Germany, we ran into trouble with that about a year and a half ago, because the German government decided to basically double down on a policy of the EU for the emission the emission trading system, where Germany did something that the EU did not do. Germany included waste incineration plants as part of the compliance market for emission certificates. And that meant a huge problem for pyrolysis plants, because they were commissioned as these waste incinerators and all of a sudden had to prove that they, first of all, are using 100% biomass. They had to prove that they are not emitting anything else beside the carbon dioxide created by incineration of the syngas, and thus basically go through this whole process, which is very complicated, takes a lot of time, just in order to basically put a zero with emissions and then get the pass for having to buy these certificates. So yeah, that is probably also something we as an industry need to approach, not only on the European but also on the national level, much like you approach the finance industry. Basically make them understand the specifics of this industry, the specific needs, and maybe get custom tailored solutions, as in the commissioning process, for example. Going back to funding and finance, you've mentioned that one of your fields of expertise is also public finance, and the examples you mentioned in your presentation were basically funding mechanisms for technological innovation. The way I've experienced it is that these, well, innovative projects are really that. They're project-based, it's rather small scale, it's usually at the pilot phase. However, with the biochar industry and especially the plant industry, we're facing an industry that has reached technology readiness level 8 to 9, depending on whether you have more than 50 plants out and operating so far. So these kind of funds don't necessarily apply to such projects. Is there public funding for larger scale projects that basically could help this industry not only to basically deliver a proof of concept, but also to really scale up biochar production, thus become climate relevant?
Yes, there is a different program of support, and they can support until the industrialization, because there is a lot of barrier to rise to achieve the production. So there is it depends of the budget of your project and the level of TRL, and you can find there is some BPI support for industrialization, and there is also from European Union really high-level innovation program for the industrialization. Its name EIC Accelerator for the late stage of the development of the technologies.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's definitely a detail that would be interesting to most of the people who are trying to get involved with this. Yes, please
I
add
have
something.
a bit of experience there as well. I guess the point is that as the TRL increases, then the funding level generally decreases. So they require match funding from industry or from the partners involved in order to try and get those projects over the line. So, yeah, I think there is funding, but it starts to become less and less attractive as the more commercialized you become.
Yeah. If I can answer, it's because at the early stage there is a lot of risk taken by the company, for example, and more you get close to the market, there is less risk. So that's the reason why they help with lower level of grants.
Okay, yeah, so there's a logic behind this madness. All right, thank you very much. Yes, Jan, please.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. My thought for the, say, TRL9 more developed, ready to industrialize project would be to rather allow something like tax credits for the biochar use, as opposed to capex funding, because you don't necessarily need that. What you might need still at this level of at this stage of the market is tax credits. I mean, in the US, many industries, I think they've done that really well historically, providing tax credits to industries. That's how they moved a lot of capital into it, right? I don't know why we are still hung up on subsidies in Europe. I think it's so much more effective for the government and for the developers to actually do tax credits. So I hope that we could also start maybe learning a little bit from the finance industry overseas. At least that one thing. Yeah, so that's my short little intervention here.
Thank you for adding that. That's actually a really good approach. Maria, I'd like to come back to you. What I really liked about your presentation was that not only did you present the best practice examples, you also presented the common mistakes that are being made. From your perspective and experience, what would be the single biggest but very common mistake that biochar project developers make?
I think usually is that there's a lack of documentation, or sometimes that the project is not mature enough for due diligence. Right, they requested the documentation, it's not ready. They don't have it prepared, and then we cannot review it. And then the investors are asking us for conclusions, and well, I mean, it's not ready. They don't have they haven't finalized the design. They don't know. They don't have a layout of the plant, and we cannot review it because it's not ready. So, and in some cases, we have told them you are not ready for this process. So, I mean, you need to mature the project a bit more and get all this documentation. And sometimes it has stopped, and then yeah, we have assisted them in maturing the project and developing all the documentation before, you know, they start a due diligence project, because they know that then the investor will say no. I mean, because these projects usually we have a red flag period, and after that we do the deep dive due diligence. So after the red flag, if the investor sees that there's too many red flags, it's too risky, they might say, okay, we stop it here. We don't go into the deep dive because that's not for us.
So documentation, okay, I get that. I think that also goes hand in hand with transparency, at least to a certain degree, because otherwise investors will get no idea of what they're dealing with.
And we see that more with pyrolysis projects than with biogas projects, that the technology developers don't want to share details on their equipment, because maybe they are afraid that others will copy and do the same. So, and many times we have seen, you can come and visit our plant, and then you're going to see everything in paper. But you cannot take pictures, it will not be online, or it has happened a couple of times, right? We can go and visit and ask questions, and they show us the documents, but then they don't share that online.
Right. Well, I mean, I get it to a certain degree. Industrial espionage is a problem.
Yes, exactly.
At the same time, I've, from a completely different field, I've heard similar experiences to what you described, really, as the ideal way of presenting yourself, where in this case, a paper mill became well, one of the market leaders really, because they were able to lower their cost of production drastically, and not the bad way by basically firing everybody, but by really technology development and advancing their production means and so on. And they actually said that they have a completely open approach to this. If anybody of their competing paper mills wants to come visit them, they'll show them every little detail, because first of all, they're convinced that if they want to reapply what they've developed, it'll take them a year or two, and by that time they have further developed their plant again and are still basically one step ahead. And at the same time, they experience that this openness was reflected from the other companies, that they all of a sudden started talking about their developments, about their advances, and thus they were able to really share and both, well, create better business opportunities for themselves. So that probably also is some advice that some people could take there, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Conor, I'd like to get back to you. I think you're the perfect example for something that Paul mentioned earlier, where he warned project developers to get locked in one biochar application and basically only focus on one application. And that the solution to really lower that risk of not being able to sell your biochar is diversification of your applications. You obviously have taken this advice, even though it may have not come from him, but marketing biochar as fuel first and then developing the other markets later, I mean, it makes sense, especially from your perspective, obviously. One thing I didn't see with your applications, but would be interesting probably because the application is very similar. Have you looked into metallurgy? For example, steel production?
Yeah, we have, in short. We don't have free feedstock, which is one of our big problems, and one of the big problems for the steel industry. So when we tell them the numbers that they would have to pay for our biochar, it kind of shuts it down pretty quickly. Now, there are niche metallurgical applications that they'll pay whatever is required because they want to effectively go green, but they're very, very small and they're hard to get. So you can't build a business case on them alone. So yes, you kind of say we came to biochar was our solution. We had a problem, and most other places know they can use biochar, but they don't know that it's the solution. So we've come the other way, and without selling it as a biocoal, we would never got our project off the ground. But we do want to get into all the other uses, but we would never be where we are today without having the actual use that we currently have, which is as a biocoal. So
right. So I mean, obviously, metallurgy wouldn't be carbon dioxide removal, but it would add to the defossilization of the steel production industry, for example. One thing that I've learned actually from one of our members is that oftentimes the metallurgic industry does not entirely understand biochar. They see it as similar to the coal that they buy and then have to turn into coke, whereas biochar basically already is coke. The biggest difference would probably be the density of the material, just because this sort of coal hasn't been, compressed under millions of tons of earth on top of it. But nevertheless, could that maybe add to the value of it, as in selling it as bio-coke, so to speak, which should be selling around €300 per ton or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. However, €300 a ton is still a long way from where we need to get to in our process. But also, they typically, we found they want to briquette it because, as you say, the density isn't correct for when it's in its raw form. So that adds to another layer of cost. So you just keep adding costs on top of it, of one on top of the other, and it kind of shuts it down pretty quickly at scale. So.
Now, comparing your approach to the other suggestions that have been made how to procure finance, what was your approach there? Is it something that is basically all based on the value created over the 5 generations of a family business, or did you also gain access to outside financing sources?
To a certain extent, it was our underlying profitability, but we hit a kind of roadblock about 3 years ago where the ultimate industrial investment was going to be too high for what we actually had left in our cash reserves, and it would stretch the company too far. So at that point we had to go out to other sources, and the other sources were, because we're a fossil fuel company, we were limited in a lot of them, but we did find green-minded kind of transition funds as such, and that is ultimately where we got our money from. But they wanted to see everything. They wanted to see everything that's been advised of before, and one of the key things that we kind of had was we had an addressable market for our product. So we had an immediately identifiable, this is where we're going to sell the product, and this is how we sold similar products in the past. So that covered that off in reality. So.
Very interesting. Robin, what would be your advice to Conor if he approached you?
I mean, the good thing is, and that's also on the use of government money and balance sheet money from governments, subsidies or grants, they're good to start with, but they're one-to-one, so you cannot really leverage it. So money out, and then someone uses the money, and then it's gone. For larger scale facilities or companies like that are existing, have a side business, the key thing in our view to unlock funding is credit enhancement, which can be either the parent company, so there can be recourse to a parent that has a business that's up and running, or it can be also guarantees by infrastructure banks or whoever wants to provide it. It can also be philanthropic guarantees. And this is coming back to the US. We're working with a project in California, and the Californian Infrastructure and Development Bank, iBank, they provide 5 million loan guarantees to projects that do some renewable and sustainable development, and biochar is part of the scope. And if you end up with a 5 million guarantee for a biochar project, you're covered to most of it. I mean, you might need a little bit more, but that's guaranteed. That's no to very low risk for investors. And that's a very efficient use of balance sheet money because you can leverage it. You just guarantee. It's not saying that you have to pay anything. Just if things really go wrong, you have to then pay out the guarantee claim, which is way more efficient than providing grants to operating companies. And it can be an infrastructure bank, but looking at Arigna is basically you receive funding not because it was a separate SPV off-balance sheet project, but because it was you, the company, backing it, and you can pay all the debt services just from the parent company cash flows if things go wrong. So that's a good thing for you, but many biochar projects, they are startups, and then you don't have this. I mean, usually you need to have a 3-year-long financial history to start with. That's an issue. Many don't have this. Yeah, but coming back to the point, I think to build on Jan's point, guarantees are a thing that we should push more in Europe with all the organizations that we have in Germany and France, or the people that are based in Brussels, to unlock funding at a European Union level or national level that provides more credit enhancements for commercial operation. That's what I would love to see.
All right, thank you very much. One last question before we take our lunch break. This one goes to you, Josh, again. You've mentioned all the challenges with, for example, the Environment Agency, the permitting regime, also local residents. That is something that probably German project developers also can very much relate to. What would your advice be? Is there any way to improve this? Is there any solution to this problem, or is this something the industry just has to deal with?
Yeah, I've thought about this before, and I think it's a difficult time that we're living in, actually, because one of the outcomes of COVID, certainly in the UK and I think in other areas, was this kind of growing distrust of science and engineering, that the kind of the expert that previously would have been able to give you advice and people would have taken it, has actually slightly been rejected in certain parts of society. So there's a bit of a distrust on that side, and I think we need to, as an industry, probably find a way to overcome that somehow. And I think you mentioned transparency earlier with some of the due diligence side. That's definitely a part of it. I think engaging as companies within our local areas will also help. So on the kind of ESG side, local initiatives, make sure that people where you're planning on doing your projects actually are on board much earlier. And I think then on communication as well, I think trying to communicate complex things. I mean, even in this room, there's lots of people still explaining what pyrolysis and biochar are to a bunch of people that probably already know. or have been experienced, but in the public domain, some of those things are completely alien concepts. So we need to try and find ways of communicating it in a way that the general public will understand, and I think that will help overcome some of it.
Thank you very much. Paul, is that something you concur with? Are your experiences similar in any way?
Yeah, we've certainly talked to quite a few projects that struggled with permitting and waste incineration, for example. But other companies have been able to endure and get things approved and then move forward. So it's not, it's not impossible, but the timing aspect is critical, and understanding that in order to avoid delays. And yeah, we've definitely experienced this, but it's just something you need to be aware of and need to work with.
All right. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, and I don't want to keep anyone from their lunch break. So this is it. We'll conclude this session. Thank you very much. You've been all lovely, and it was very interesting.